I'd like to welcome our speaker for today, who's Professor MIcheal Chwe from the University of California at Los Angeles. Michael's in political science there, and he's been someone whose work I've profited from many years, and I've more recently have had the good fortune of becoming personally acquainted with Michael and becoming his colleague and friend. And I'll just, one more little thing is that Michael, among his various professional achievements, he's the author of the now classic work called Rational Ritual, which in my opinion has set the standard for the analysis of common knowledge for today. So it's in its second edition, but I feel like I was smart enough to buy the first edition. So with that, I'd like to welcome Professor Chwe.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you so much for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be here. I passed out one handout. It's just a single sheet, and all it is just a printout of a slide I will show you, but it's very detailed, so it's probably easy to see it. Does anyone have one? Okay. All right, so what I'm going to talk about today is stereotypes, and the title is Stereotypes Are More Powerful When People Like to Agree with Each Other. So this is actually a very simple, almost commonsensical argument I'm going to make. Okay, so how do racial, gender, etc. stereotypes influence our opinions? What I'm going to say is a stereotype is not just an operation on an individual, rather it's something which occurs in a group, in the sense that a stereotype is all considered as a low information, but it's a public signal. So this is from Cecilia Ridgway, sociologist. Basic gender stereotypes appear to be consensual knowledge in the United States, and that virtually everyone knows the content of these beliefs. Most people presume that most others in society hold these stereotypes. In other words, there's stereotypes that Asians are good at math, or something like that. It's not just, it's very low information, but it's something which is publicly held. There's, people think that other people hold them. So Ridgway has done research on this with respect to gender stereotypes. Okay? So it's not only that people hold them, but people think that other people hold them. Okay? So they're public in that sense. So the argument is simply, when people want to express opinions that are similar to those of others, so say that you're making a group decisions, many academic decisions are made in a group, like graduate admissions or hiring decisions. Several people get together and sit around the table and make a decision. Everyone has to say their opinion. There's a little bit of an element of wanting to say the same opinion as somebody else. Okay? So in these situations, public signals are especially powerful because they serve to coordinate opinions. Okay? So what I'm saying is that stereotypes are particularly powerful because they're public. They're weak information, or even no information, but they're particularly powerful because they're public. Okay? It's because people know that other people also know. Okay? So this is common knowledge in the sense that Peter got. So stereotypes coordinate people's opinions. That's my argument. All right, so now you can look at the handout. So this is the main, I claim that this explains a little bit of an empirical puzzle, which is in your handout. So what is this thing? Okay, so this is 119 academic fields. The numbers in this graph are percentage of women who have gotten PhDs, percentage of the PhDs, recent PhDs in these fields who are women. Okay, so for example, in finance, 31% of recent PhDs are women. In operations research, 29%. Okay. What's on the x-axis is average quantitative GRE in field. This is the average quantitative GRE of seniors who are entering graduate school in these fields. Okay, so notice, this is very well known, the number of women, percentage of women is lower the more quantitative it is. Okay, this is a very well known fact. So these numbers are lower than over here. Okay? Now this is the other thing which I'm going to push in my talk here. This axis is the skewness of citation distribution in the field. Now what does that mean? Okay, so what this is you look at the papers in this field and you look at the citation distribution. So some papers are never cited, some papers are cited a ton of times. So you look at this distribution and you do this. So let's say this is the distribution of citations. So these are a small number of papers which get 9 citations. These papers get 0. Okay? Skewness is kind of how much of it is about the tails. Okay, so what I measure skewness is, it's the percentage of papers which get fewer than the mean number of citations. Okay, so in this particular distribution, the mean is like 1.76 or something. Okay, so 63% of papers get fewer than the mean. Okay, so you can think of it this way. Think of it the most extreme case where there's literally one paper which gets every single citation. Okay, in that case, skewness is 100%. Okay, or think of it as a very flat distribution. In that case, skewness is 50%. Okay, all right. So what do I take this as? To me, this is kind of how much people want to agree with the opinions of others. If there's one paper out there, assuming everybody cites, that means that everyone really, really wants to agree on what's an important paper, because they do actually agree. Okay? So this is my deal. This is the skewness. It ranges basically from 60 to 78 or something. Finance is the most skewed. Nursing science and marine science is the least skewed. Okay, my argument is, as you go up here, people care more about conformity in some sense. They care more about having the same opinion as somebody else. And what we see is that the percentage of women also decreases as I go up. Okay, this is my claim. Okay. And you can kind of see it, and you can inspect it with your eyes. There are, of course, exceptions, like statistics is an exception. But roughly speaking, as I go up here, even controlling for the quantitativeness of the field, the number of women goes down as it becomes a more and more skewed field. Okay, it kind of, as the field becomes kind of more all or nothing, then there are fewer women in those fields. Okay, that's my claim. So I'll talk about this more in a second, and I'll do regression and stuff. But that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. All right. So this is just more particularly. See, this is engineering. Like a lot of the discussion of why women and men are differently distributed in fields has to do with like humanities versus math or something very broad categories. What's interesting is there's a fair amount of variation even among the engineering fields. These are all very quantitative fields, very technical fields. What's interesting is that there's a large variation. Like electrical engineering has 16% women, industrial engineering and bioengineering have 30 or 37%. That's pretty different. And my claim is these numbers basically decrease as you go up. Okay, that's my claim. All right. Okay. So this is my argument in detail. So many important decisions are made by groups in which people express their opinions publicly, like we have a hiring committee or graduate admissions committee or grant committee. We all look at this proposal and say, oh, what do you think about this? We make our opinions and we have to say it out loud. Each person wants to express an opinion similar to those of others, okay? So there's an element of conformity, and the classic literature on this is by Ash. So Ash showed people this line segment and said, which of these things is the same distance as this? I'm sure you're familiar with this experiment. This is like total classic social psychology thing. So if you did people alone, 99.9% of people get this correctly. What Ash did is had 7 people in a row, all Confederates, say, oh no, it's not, it's that one, it's not this one. And then roughly 1/3 of the people were swayed. Okay, so it's a very easy task, but you know, there is something to conformity, okay? Especially if you see 7 people say the wrong thing and you think, geez, something wrong with me. Okay? All right, so there is some evidence for this. In academia, most important decisions are made by groups and not by single people. They're made by groups in which people have to discuss their opinions. Especially, and here's some nice little quotes. This is a classic thing from Capel and McGee. There's very little point in trying to determine how good the man, by the man I mean John Kennett, how good the man really is. What is important is what others in the discipline think of him. So, and this is sort of true. If you're in a hiring decision, the very important part is how much do other people care about this person? But of course, there's a little bit of self-fulfilling prophecy there, right? You basically want to hire people who are good, but what good means is that other people think they're good, okay? Merton, this is a Robert Merton wrote in the so-called Matthew effect. Sometimes people use their term cumulative advantage. Basically, if you're famous, it's much easier to become famous. There's this classic interview of a Nobel Prize winner saying, you know, I did good work, but people ascribe to me work which I didn't do just because they think it's cool to ascribe work to me. You know, actually my co-authors did it, but it's much easier to get famous if people think you're already good. So again, I use the term conformity, but it's not just about that. It's not about necessarily about being a lemming. It is actually costly to do it. You know, if you've ever been in a situation where you were the only person who made like for example, I was once in a tenure decision, I voted no, and everyone else voted yes. We all respected each other, but still I paid costs for that. It's simply there are costs, okay? It's not easy. It's not tremendously difficult, but you know, it's just more harmonious for everybody, for everyone. Okay, so it can be costly to express a different opinion, even when colleagues disagree. So that's the one thing I'm assuming, that there is an element of wanting to agree with the opinions of others. So this is the second part of the argument. In a group decision, each person sees public signals and private signals. What are the public signals? They're common knowledge. They're signals which you know and you know that other people also know. Okay, what are those things? Examples are on John Kennett's gender presentation, ethnicity, height, weight, hair color, subfield, and home institution. People say, oh, that person's went to MIT, that person went to UPenn or whatever, that person went to UC Davis or something. You know, it doesn't, you know, there's sort of a brand element to all these things, okay? And you see it and you know that other people understand it. Certainly like your gender, hair color, that kind of thing is signal. What is not a public signal? I'll call it private signals. They're usually much more specific and informational, but each person does not know whether other people see them. And the examples are usually for a job thing, it's the person's actual written work, which you would think is public because it's out there, but actually very few people actually read it when you make a decision, okay? And you might see the title, and that's like a brand, and you know that other people say, oh, if it's in that journal, that has a certain kind of, I know that other people understand the journal is good, but when I read like for a job candidate, I'm pretty sure that most people don't read it. I'm pretty sure that most other people have not read the same way. And even if they have, they might have a completely different opinion than me. Okay? So even though the best quality signal is their written work, but that's much less public, okay? In the sense that I don't think that other people are necessarily having the same opinion about it as I do. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So I'm going to focus here on gender. Gender is especially public, okay, because your gender presentation is very signaled in many multiple ways. Your name, the way you talk, physical features, clothing, mannerisms, so many different ways. Okay, so that's signal. So it's a very strong common knowledge thing because I can say, oh, that person presents as male, so I'm pretty sure that because of all the other ways they can present as male, other people understand the person as male too. Okay, so gender especially is very. And much of our everyday life is organized around gender. I just went to the male bathroom, for example. Okay. People can assume that other people find gender distinctions meaningful. And so this is also getting worked by Chwe. People, even if they themselves don't care much about gender, they tend to assume that other people do. Okay. All right. What about stereotypes? There's lots of evidence that sexist stereotypes exist. For example, here, looking at CVs, this is a classic kind of thing. Let's take a CV and change the name and see how people look at it differently. And in this case, both male and female academics in psychology are more likely to support hiring a male job candidate over a female with identical qualifications. That's pretty well known. There's lots of stuff like that. And again, I'm doing my Chwe quote again. This stereotype is not just an individual bias, but public. Okay? And it's created by history, lots of public sexist statements, exclusion of women, etc. over the years. Okay, so in other words, the idea that women are maybe not as good at academics, it's a very weak stereotype, but everyone assumes that other people know it. Okay? It has a public historical character. Okay? And that's why we should put it. Okay. How about more examples? So Upson and Friedman asked people to name 10 female geniuses in history. Okay, so you and I were all academics. Even us would have a hard time doing this. You go Marie Curie, Joan Robinson, economist. 10, I don't know. It's not easy. Even this might be the case. Even if you know 10 really smart women, okay, what's the difference? Is because this question refers to public figures, okay, not geniuses you happen to know. In other words, the difference, the stereotype between men and women is much stronger among public figures than it is among your own friends. Okay, kind of for a historical reason. So anyway, so the conclusion is, when a job candidate presents as a woman, her gender is a public signal, the gender itself is public, and the stereotype of women are academically inferior is public, even if weak, even if very weak, okay? At least it's a public. What about the private signals? A job candidate's scholarly work is much less public. A person reading it knows most of her colleagues don't. So what I'm going to present is a model in which people see a public signal, which is very weak, and a private signal, which can be very strong, but the public signal, the stereotype outweighs the private signal because there's a reason, because there's a motivation to be conformist. Okay? That's the idea. Okay. So if a person cares only about scholarly quality, the superior information from a woman's scholarly work can outweigh the stereotype. And this is the optimistic story about how women can overcome stereotypes over time. Because people say, oh, I know I'm stereotyped as a woman, but her work is really great, so therefore I'll hire her. Okay? However, that story does not take into account the fact that if people want to form opinions which are similar to others, the women's scholarly work is disadvantaged because it is effectively private. Okay? Effectively, when I read the work, I don't think the other people will also read it. So, a stereotype is influential because people know that by following this public signal, they're more likely to express an opinion similar to others. Okay, so we're in a table, lots of different signals. Some are private. I think her work is great. But I know that other people are, I know her work is great, but I know that other people don't necessarily see that same signal. Okay? What I do know is I see her gender, and I know that other people are seeing that same signal. Okay, so therefore, if I want to coordinate with others, that public signal has greater oomph in some sense than the much higher quality private signal which I read by myself. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's it. That's the only way I'm going to make it speak. Okay. So, in other words, given that you want to choose an opinion similar to others, following your own private signal doesn't do very good because you don't know if other people have read the same work. However, following a public signal does better, okay, even if it's much weaker information. Okay. So public signals such as stereotypes can outweigh private signals that have much greater informational value. The more people care about agreeing with each other, the greater the power of stereotypes and the more difficult they are to overcome. So this is my model. So I'm a game theorist, so this is the kind of thing I do. So this is math, straight up math. There are two people who evaluate a candidate. The candidate is either high quality, 1 with probability pi 1, or low quality 0 with probability pi 0. So you can think of it like a Bayesian inference kind of problem. Okay? So each person sees an independent private signal about the candidate, which is either high or low, and correct with probability p. So private means the lowercase. So you see a signal either high or low, okay, and it's correct with probability p. P is kind of how good the information is. If p is like 0.99, that means it's really high quality information. If p is by 0.51, that means it's really low quality information. They also see a public signal about the candidate, which is either high, that is capital H, or low, capital L, and correct with probability q. So I'm seeing two signals. I see a public signal, which I know you see, but I also see a private signal, which I know only I see. Okay, and they are of different quality. Okay, so after observing your own private signal and the public signal, each person chooses an opinion, which is just a number. It's going to be a number between 0 and 1. So remember, 0 means low quality, 1 means high quality. Each person wants to choose an opinion that is close to the candidate's true quality y, but also close to the other person's opinion. So this is my utility functions. This is like a quadratic loss. So I want to choose my A1 to be close to y, where y is the true quality of the person, either 0 or 1. Okay, so if I think the person is low quality, 0, I want to make my A1 close to 0. If I think the person's high quality, I want to make my A1 close to 1. Okay? But there's also this term, which is, this is the difference between my opinion and your opinion. Okay? I also want to make that small. Okay? So basically I want to make my A1 close to A2. So I want to make my A1 close to the true thing, the true quality, but I also want to make it close to A2. Okay? And I have to have these competing goals. And this R is how much I care about conformity in some sense relative to correctness. Okay? So for example, if R is 0, then I don't care about conformity at all. Okay? This is something that just goes away. I only care about getting the right opinion. If R is 100 or something, that means basically this goes away. I only care about being conformist. And so move review. Again, this parameter R is how much a person cares about being close to the other person's opinion. So this is a game. There are 4 parameters. It's called capital gamma of pi 1. This is how much your prior belief is that the person's high quality. P is the quality of the private signal. Q is the quality of the public signal. And R is how much you care about agreeing with the other person. Sort of the conformity parameter. Any questions about that? All right. Okay, so this is a game. How do I make a prediction? Well, what is a strategy? It's going to be 4 numbers. I'm going to express it as a function. So what does this mean? This is my opinion if I had a high private signal and a high public signal. This is my opinion if I have a low private signal that as I read her work, it wasn't that great, but she graduated from Harvard or something like that. Okay? This is my opinion if I got a high private signal, low public signal. Maybe she went to Mississippi State, but her work is fantastic. And this is if I have a low private signal and a low public signal. Okay? Makes sense? I don't mean to disparage Mississippi State. I'm from University of Alabama. I grew up in University of Alabama, so it was kind of an SEC thing. Anyway, we solved for the national equilibrium in this game. All right. So there's a bunch of math in there. It's not actually that difficult. What you get is this. This is a little complicated, but it's just, what is it? It's a function. So this is my opinion. It's just a number, which is a function of all these, my parameters. Just again, this is my prior belief. This is the quality of the evidence that's there. There's some R's in there. Okay, what is this? Well, if you make all the R 0, what does this mean? Get rid of all this R. Anytime you see an R, what you get is just this. This is just Bayes' rule. Okay? This is so. If you don't care about the other person at all conformity, you simply update with Bayes' rule. So, for example, this is how much I care. This is my opinion given I got a high signal, high private signal, and high public signal. Okay? What is that? Well, the probability that that happened is the person is high quality, and both signals are correct, right? Plus the probability the low person was low quality and both signals were wrong. Yeah? And that's in the denominator, right? That's a probability that thing happened. Okay. And then this is simply the probability that the person really is high quality. Does that make sense? So, you know, this is just literally Bayes' rule. Okay, so you can think of this as just nothing more than an elaboration of Bayes' rule where you care about conformity. Okay, that's a way to think about this. Okay, so all these other things are not Bayes' rule. Okay, let me give you an example. Say that my prior belief is 0.5. That is, I'm on the fence whether the person is good or bad initially. That's my prior belief. Say my P and Q are 0.7. So it's pretty good information, not great, but okay information. And my R is 0. Okay, so here, my private signal and public signal are equally high quality. Okay, so this is my opinion if I get both high quality signals. Okay, now if I both get high quality signals, my opinion goes up to 0.84, okay, because this is good information. I really do think this person is more likely to be a high quality person. Okay? If I both got bad signals, then my opinion goes down to 0.155. Okay? I think it's more likely that he's not a great person. Quality 0. How about this? This is where I got a high quality private signal but a low quality public signal. Well, these are equally, informative, so it just balances out. Those things simply balance out. Similarly, if I had a low probability private signal and high quality public signal, it's all the same. Okay, they just simply balance out. Okay, so that's how that works. What if P is a little higher? Now, my private signal is higher quality. Okay, so now what happens? Well, if they both get good signals, now this increases higher because increases even more because I have better information, right? I have one private signal is now higher quality. How about here? This is where my private signal is high quality, the public signal is low quality. Now I have a high quality private signal, a low quality public signal. Now the private signal is better information than the public signal, so therefore this is bigger than 0.5. Does that make sense? Yeah, because the private signal is higher quality, so therefore the private signal outweighs the public signal. Similarly here, now when I get a low private signal and a high public signal, the private signal being low outweighs the public signal. And again, now if they're both bad, my opinion is close to 0. Does that make sense? And similarly, if my public signal was 0.8, high quality, you just have a reverse story. Okay? What's interesting is when R is 0, it doesn't matter. You don't care about public or private. It doesn't matter. It's just all different pieces of information. Okay? They're just independent in some sense. Okay? You don't care whether it's public, private, is not. And now let's R equal 2. Okay, now when P and Q are both 0.7, okay, if both signals are high, then my opinion increases. If both signals are low, my opinion decreases. No, this is interesting. Okay, they're both equally high quality. Here I got my private signal as high, but my public signal is low. Okay, before, when R was 0, this is 0.5, but now this is 0.373. Okay, so I have two signals. They're equally good quality. There's their 0.7. Okay, however, the public signal is low, private signal is high. Because of the conformity effect, this number goes down. It's not 0.5 anymore, it's 0.373. Okay? This public signal outweighs the private signal, even though it's equally high quality informationally. Okay? The reason is because when people see the public signal, they know that the other person sees it, so therefore it allows us to coordinate on that opinion. Because I care about choosing an opinion similar to the other person's. Okay? Makes sense? Okay, so interestingly, how about this? This is where the private signal is low, the public signal is high. Here, the public signal outweighs the private. Now you might say, okay, look, my private signal is 0.8, my public signal is 0.7, and still, the private signal is not good enough to outweigh the public signal. Okay, still, it's going to be 0.441. So I might ask the question, how good does the private signal have to be to outweigh this 0.7? Okay, so 0.8 was not enough. Yeah.
Just a quick clarifying question about the
Sure.
model. So is the assumption that the other player will definitely choose the public, the response based on the public signal?
No. It's an equilibrium. So
Okay.
they don't do the same thing you are. Yeah, I should have been made clear. Yeah, the equilibrium is both people playing F.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So it's fully strategic in that sense. Yeah. So the other person is doing the same thing you are. Thanks. Okay. All right, so, okay, let's go. If R is 0, and the quality of the public signal is 0.7, then a private signal has to be 0.7 to outweigh to make it balance out to 0.5. Okay? When R is 2 and the public signal is 0.7, how big of a private signal, how good of a private signal do you need to overcome that? Well, it turns out 0.8 is not even big enough, right? This number is still less than 0.5. Okay? When R is 2, what you need is a P of 0.855. I did that just by plugging in numbers. And once you have P is 0.855, then finally are they equal? Another way to think about it is, when R is 2, when there's some conformity, you have to have really good work, much higher quality work, to overcome the stereotype. Okay? The information for the private signal has to be much higher in quality. Okay? It has to be true 85% of the time to overcome a signal which is a bad signal, which is true 0.7 70% of the time. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's the model. That's how it works. Any questions about that? Yeah.
It looks like in the 0.7.72 case, you just generally become less certain.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, exactly, right. Oh, yeah, so exactly, compared to this, yeah, you're exactly. I think there's an element of like, just, not taking extreme positions. Oh, yeah, you sort of, it's a group mentality kind of thing. Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. Actually, that might be another way to test the model, which I hadn't thought about, but yeah, that's true. Okay, yeah, I'll give this a thought, yeah, okay. All right, any questions? Go on. Okay. All right, anyway, when R equals 0, private and public signals affect one's opinions equally. When R equals 2, it takes a much more informative private signal to outweigh a public signal. Okay, so this is the picture I have. When pi 1 is 0.5, we have this picture. What is on the x-axis? This is P. This is the probability the private signal is correct. What's on the y-axis? Q is a probability the public signal is correct. What these lines are is simply those P and Q which make the signals balance out. Okay, that is, someone's opinion when they have a high quality private signal and a low quality public signal is the same as they have a low quality private signal and high quality public signal. Okay, it's like that 0.5, 0.5. Okay? In other words, these are the P's and Q's which make the private signal and public signal equally important for your decision. Okay, balance each other out. Okay. When R equals 0, we have this. What does this mean? It means that if your private signal is 0.8, the public signal which balances out is also 0.8. Okay, that's kind of the example I did before, when R equals 0. Here, there's no, all you care about is information. You don't care about it's public or private. Okay. When R equals 2, that's the example we did. Here, when Q is 0.7, you need a P of 0.855. That is, when you have a public signal which is not great, not terrible, but not great, it's true 70% of the time, you need a private signal which is correct 85% of the time to balance it out when R equals 2. What about when R equals 10? Okay, now people care about conformity more. Okay. Now, for example, to balance out a public signal of 0.7, you need like a private signal of 0.91 or 0.92, some fairly high quality signal to balance it out. Okay? So the trade-off gets worse and worse and worse as R increases. Okay? In other words, kind of the hill you have to climb, as R increases, the hill you have to climb to get out of the hole from a public signal gets higher and higher. Now think of it this way. Okay, so look, if R is 10, say that you get a bad public signal, but that bad public signal is very uninformative, that it's true only 55% of the time, just like barely information at all. Okay? So how much of a private signal do you need to get to balance it out? You need like 0.87 or something like that. Yeah, so even a very uninformative stereotype, okay, to overcome even a very uninformative stereotype, you need very high quality private information. What R is 10. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Are 2 and 10 reasonable numbers in here? Is it really reasonable to think twice as likely to value conformity than truth?
So I don't know.
What would be the reasonable range?
I think what would be cool is if you could kind of infer that from the data, right? Somehow. I don't know. I mean, I guess what you would say is like if you look at those, like the ash line experiments or something, like there's 7 people, and you, so for example, are the third of the people who made the wrong decision that is conformed, when they asked them why they did that, a lot of them felt like, oh, I didn't know what I was doing, or I thought it would look really weird if I chose something else. You know, like, it is true, like, hard to say, like when I've been in a situation where I made a decision which is different from everybody else, I felt that R pretty heavy, you know, like, you know, people, I would wonder how people would look at me in the hallways and stuff like that, like, he's that guy who made that different decision, you know, so I don't know, you know. I would, yeah. I'll bring that up in another issue. Another question is like, so in the graph you have, like, so I have that the citation distance skewness. How much? I basically claim that's the same as R, but like, how much of that is, you know, how significant is that? Like, how much is R changing? Anyway. Now, I did this picture when this pi1 is 0.5. That is, you were completely, unclear, uncertain about. Say the person's, you know, fresh PhD or whatever. You're not really sure if they're good or bad. You barely know them, whatever. So therefore, your pi1 is 0.5. How about when pi1 is 0.99? That is, this person, you know almost for sure that they're high quality. Okay, they've been publishing in the field or whatever. You know, they have a great job or something. Okay, so the candidate is almost certainly good. You still have this trade-off. Okay, well, when your pi1 is 0.99, your signals actually don't change the opinions very much. Like, if you're 0.99, you get 2 bad signals, the opinion might go to 0.97 or something like that. Okay, so that's what happens when, like in Bayes' rule. If you have one very high opinion, you know, things not going to change too much. Okay, it's not like the previous case where it went from 0.5 to 0.28 or something. Okay, so it won't change much. This is true. However, think of this as a very senior person. If you look at, so if you're a very senior senior person, no negative or positive signal will affect people's opinion of you very much. However, we can still ask the question, is the public versus private trade-off? Okay? And so it turns out that actually that trade-off is even worse than if it's pi1 is 0.5. Because even if you're a very senior person, okay, if you have a bad public signal, it takes a lot more of a good private signal to overcome it. Okay? So you just have a similar thing. So these gray things are from when pi1 is 0.5. This is when pi1 is 0.9. So like, for example, a very senior candidate is less vulnerable to any negative signal, but her vulnerability to a public signal relative to a private signal is even greater than for a degree candidate. Okay. So this is just a calculate for the model, and it's kind of interesting. So for example here, if pi1 is 0.99, if I have a bad public signal of 0.7, I need a private signal of almost 0.9 to make up for it. Okay? Any questions about the model? That's basically it. And I should say it's kind of a version of a well-known model by Morris and Shin in 2002. Okay. All right. So now here's the data section of the paper. Okay. So this is explained a little handout. So I'm looking at, so the issue of why women are represented in some fields in academia and not in others is a kind of a well-known research topic. I'm not an expert in this by any means. Okay, but one thing I did do is I looked at a lot more fields than what most people look at. So I looked at 119 academic fields. So this is including some very, like computational biology is one of these fields. It's pretty, some relatively niche fields. So I looked at 119 academic fields. I get the percentage of women in ethnic groups who received doctorates in this field in 2011. So this is not a percentage of women who are like senior in the field. This is a percentage of women who got PhDs in the field recently. Okay. And I will present stuff on ethnicity, and ethnicity refers only to U.S. citizens and primary residents. But women are first to be taken. So the skewness of distribution of citations in the field is from Albaran, Crespo, Trino, and Stew, who did a huge amount of work. They looked at like this, the Web of Science database, which is this huge, massive thing for Thomson Reuters, and people have looked at this. They looked at papers in this 4-year period and looked at the citation distribution. So they actually collected those things. And the mathematical and verbal ability in the field is given by the Educational Testing Service. They look at college seniors and non-enrolled college graduates who took the GRE in 2011 to 2012. So that's how we measure how quantitative the field is. Okay, so that's what it is. So I had to do a little bit of work. So like, for example, the fields and the fields are slightly different in all these things, so I kind of had to mix and match a little bit to make sure they all look consistent. Okay, anyway, so let me talk again about skewness. The skewness of the citation distribution in the field is the percentage of papers that receive fewer than the average number of citations. So in this example, say 0.41%. Actually, this is almost always the mode in citation distributions, by the way. So if your paper gets 1 citation, you're already ahead of the game. And so the other interesting thing is the citation distribution is very different in different fields. Like in some fields, there's a ton of citations. Like the mean number of citations is like 12. In some fields, it's like 2. Okay, so it's very different. So one nice thing about this measure is that it's scale-free in that sense. Okay. There are problems with this measure. It's not perfect. But again, the skewness is the percentage of papers which is less than the mean. Okay, so in this case, the mean is 1.7. Skewness is 63. So the percentage of papers which have fewer citations than the mean. And my argument is the higher the skewness in the field, the higher the conformity of the field. So again, like one issue is like how much that R is actually changing with these things. But that's what I'm doing. Okay, so think of an extreme case. This is high skewness, so almost all papers, well, like I don't know, like 86% of papers get 0 or 1 citations, but then some get like 40% get 9. Okay, so this is kind of like an all or nothing kind of thing. In this case, the skewness is high, it's 86. Okay. And when it's kind of the opposite of all or nothing, like everyone gets a little bit of place in the sun, it's all kind of nice. Now skewness is like 50. Okay, so you have, so people have 4s, 3 have 7s. Okay, so this is kind of more even. Then the skewness is 50. So this to me indicates that R is low, or 0. Because people are not necessarily agreeing on like the star papers. All right. Where does my data come from? So I'll just talk about them. So this is from the National Science Foundation. These are the number of fields in agricultural science and natural resources. So this is how many fields they have. They have 12, and this I have 10. They have 29 fields in biology, I have 27. So I have pretty good coverage. This is the doctorates awarded. So some, I don't have perfect. So for example, there might be in agricultural science, just in the NSF, but not in the Thomson Reuters Web of Science, that kind of thing. Or not in the Educational Testing Service. So I have to do that. So pretty good coverage in the natural sciences. What I don't have is education and humanities. And the reason is because there's a lot more education fields in NSF than every other source has. Like NSF, for example, like there's a field of like science education, humanities education. These are considered different fields in the NSF. So I don't have any humanities at all. And the reason is because Thomson Reuters do not really collect citation information on humanities because they're much more book-driven fields, and those citations are not really picked up in Thomson Reuters. So the whole kind of practice of citations is different in humanities, and even among book-oriented fields in social science, not philosophy. So no humanities, but everything else I more or less have. And in fact, I have, maybe like 70-80% of all doctorates in the United States. So it's pretty good coverage. Okay, it's of almost all academia. So roughly half of the ones of the fields in the US. All right, so this is the picture I have. So you can just look at it yourself. Again, my claim is that these numbers should decrease as I go up. And of course there are exceptions, like statistics has a lot of women in it, even though it has high skewness and it's very math heavy. And this is probably one of the biggest outliers. Statistics. Finance is kind of a pretty big outlier too. Okay. If I look at over here, these are less quantitative, but you still see kind of this thing, like nursing science is 91% women, and these numbers do kind of decrease as you go up. Okay. And so many around. Okay, so you might say, I'm really comparing apples and oranges. These are all quite different things. Natural science, engineering, all different. So let's do it by fields. This is engineering, and my claims roughly is that these numbers do decrease as you go up. By engineering and industrial engineering are kind of less all or nothing kinds of fields. They have more women. Electrical engineering seems to be more kind of you're either a star or not. As human. This is physical sciences. There's more variation in math in this than I expected in here. Okay, but statistics is an outlier, but roughly speaking, even among very quantitative fields, you see this pattern. Okay, this basically decreases in this direction. And so I think there's some evidence for the claim.
So, quick question, is there a reason why robotics and computer science are classified in physical sciences rather?
This is just from the NSF classification.
Okay.
Yeah, so there might be an issue with that, yeah. Yeah. Some of these fields are actually also super small. They're really small fields. How about biology? Okay, a lot more women in biology, so almost all these numbers are bigger than 50. Okay, a lot of them. But again, roughly speaking, they decrease as you go up. And this is agricultural sciences and natural resources. The pattern is less clear here, but still not too bad. Food sciences, a lot of women, very quantitative compared to everything else. Okay, but it has low students. Okay, so then I do what everyone else does and just do a regression. So yeah, go ahead.
Have you taken into account or thought about the fact that for people who are actually accepted into very quantitative fields, the quantitative GRE is sort of non-selective because you tend to get this kind of swashing or scaling?
Yeah. I think that's like, for example, like what are the most ones? Like this 165 is the highest possible GRE you can get in math. And I do think, well, they also changed the GRE not too recently. Like it used to be, they were all squashed at 800 until I think just 3 or 4 years ago they changed the GRE, so they tried to make it less squashed. So I think if you look at like these right at the top, I think there is some difference which is not noise. I don't know, like the most one is atomic physics. So these are all like pretty heavily theoretical math things. And you know, if you look here, it's like finance, computational biology, economics, astronomy, mechanical engineering. So they're also quantitative, you know, but I can see how that would be less mathy than atomic physics, you know, so, but you're right, I mean, I think there's an issue there. There's another issue about whether the GRE actually reflects the curriculum too, like, you know.
Right, but the GRE quantitative test kind of under tests people who are qualified to say be mathematicians, right? Because it's very, it's a relatively basic test.
Yeah, that's true,
compared
that's
to what
true.
you're trained in.
Yeah, that's true. I think of another way of doing that. Of trying to measure the quantitativeness of a field. I don't know. This is convenient, I guess, because at least, like, so the ETS does it for all these different fields. So, I don't know. But it might be, you could look at the journals and see like the number of equations per page or something like that. Among social science, I think it's pretty good. Like economics is here, or political science is somewhere in here, sociology is in here, anthropology is in here. None of these measures are perfect by any means. Anyway, so this is my regression. So the first one is just on skewness alone, it's significant to some degree. Now I'm doing skewness and quantitative GRE. So this is the regression which simply corresponds to that big graph. Okay, so skewness is not super significant. But when I put all the dummies for the fields, the correct for the fields, then I do get some. So it's not too bad. Okay. And I'm thinking this is not just an accident or mistake. I think this is maybe a real thing. Oh, another question some of these people have, look, the skewness goes from 60 to 75. That's not a very big range either in some sense. So that's a real decent question. Anyway. All right, so this is my regression. 190 fields. The R squared for this is 0.795, so that's that. Okay, so this is the effect sizes. Okay, so this is the effect size of the variable as it goes from minimum to maximum. Okay, so for example, quantitative GRE, going from the minimum quantitative GRE to the maximum, the difference in the percentage of women in fields is 37%. Okay, so again, correcting for everything else, going from here to here should give you a 37% loss in number of women. Does this make sense? So that's what it means. Okay, so in other words, the quantitativeness makes a big difference. Verbal GRE, not too much. These are kind of maybe reasonable. Psychology, like psychology tends to have more women corrected for everything else. Physical sciences have fewer. This is the quantitative. This is the skewness thing. So the point of this is simply, as I go from skewness, it goes from the bottom to the top, range. It is significant, not just statistically, but in terms of the numbers of people. That is, going from correcting for everything else, going from the least skewed to the most skewed makes the percentage of women drop by 70%, which is, I think, significant. not just statistically significant, but numerically significant sometimes. The effect size is not unreasonable. So I think it is a real effect. All right, so now let's try to do this. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you go back one slide, please? How do the fields have,
Oh,
are they dummy coded?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, yeah, 0, 1. I'm sorry, that's right. Yeah.
Sorry, what is it?
They're just 0, 1. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
it's- So I guess then what that measure would mean.
Okay, all it means is,
So going from 0 psychology to 1, you get 12% difference in women. What would that mean?
Right.
There's 12% more women in psychology than in every other field?
yeah, exactly. Correcting for everything else, knowing that you're in psychology, those fields, there's like 12 psychology fields, with 12% more women in those fields.
Okay.
All right. Now I'm going to do the same thing for ethnicity. Okay, when I did this is the first time I realized maybe there's actually something to this. So notice, first of all, the percentage of women, this is just a histogram of the percentage of women in the field. So women has a very large distribution. So I think this is like nursing sciences, 91%. This might be like a type of physics or something. So it's a very large range. So there's a lot you can do with that. Okay. Percentage of white also has a pretty big range. This is temporary visa status. This is people who are either foreign students, or basically anybody who's not a permanent resident or a citizen. So it's basically undocumented people and what we call foreign students. That's a large range. Okay. Asian, Black, Hispanic, the range is a little bit less, but there's still something you can do with it. So basically, the reason I'm putting this up here is because the statistics of Black and Hispanic and Asian are less significant. So I'm kind of trying to say why that is, because there's less variation in the underlying data. Yeah.
No Native American and no Pacific Islander?
No, because the NSF does not provide it. Yeah. So it just comes from the NSF every year. There's this thing called Survey of Earned Doctorates, and that's what's okay. So let's do the same thing. Now this is the field effects for Asian, Black, White, temporary visa status, and women. You probably can't see that. First of all, I want to show these are all the things. So there's not a huge amount of action here. These are the field dummies. Okay. However, I'm going to focus in on my skewness, verbal geography. Okay. So notice, this is some things make a lot of sense. For example, these are basically foreign students. So a foreign student, correcting for everything else, is much more likely to be in a field with this high quantity of jury, okay? i.e. math, because math is like the universal language. That's how you can come to the United States. Okay. Women have fewer, correcting for everything else, fields with higher, more mathy are less black. Women. Interestingly, more mathy fields have fewer whites and more Asians. So I guess there's a stereotype just confirms. Okay, so this is to me the interesting thing. So this is what I reported already. Okay, so this is the 13, almost 17% reason already. Going from minimum to maximum skewness, the percentage of women goes down by 20%. Okay? But that's also true for Black and Hispanic. Okay, that to me is very interesting evidence to me. Okay, so there's no reason it had to be that way for Black and Hispanic. Okay, but that, to me that's evidence that there is a this isn't just nothing. It is actually evidence for a stereotype effect. And it's not true for Asians. Interesting? So this is consistent with a story where there's a negative stereotype about Blacks and Hispanics, but a positive one toward Asians. Okay? And not one for whites. Okay. So that to me, maybe it's just a statistical kind of luck of the draw, but to me that's interesting. Yeah.
Is there a way to sort of evaluate the size of this effect while holding temporary or Asian admittance as constant, right? So that we can be sure that it's not just that there are in these fields that there are more Asian temporary acceptances made that sort of produces the
Oh, yes.
proportion.
So you're saying we're not looking at the people in the field, but whether they're admitted.
Right, exactly. Or do you?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's if that actually should apply here or not.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess again, I'm just doing the simplest thing with the data because they do report that, but I think you probably have to actually look at every department and say how good did you admit and all that kind of stuff. But maybe that data might be collected. I know that like when you do the hiring decisions, like you have to report to some federal authority, like how many women are in the pool, all that kind of stuff. So that may be possible. Yeah, that's okay. Anyway, okay, so to me, this is something that there's something going on here. I think there's some evidence here. This is interesting. So there tend to be more whites in fields with a higher verbal agility. Fewer foreign students. This is not surprising. Fewer foreign students in more English-heavy fields. Fewer Asians in English-heavy fields. Fewer blacks and Hispanics. So you see the skewness effect is smaller for Asians, blacks, and Hispanics than for women. Okay, and that's why I gave you this thing here, because it's smaller, absolutely, but it's large in a relative sense to comparing to how many people are on there. Do you see what I'm saying? Right. So like a 4% range among Asians and blacks is much larger than a 4% range among women. Okay. So I think that this is to some degree also significant, not just statistically, but in actual kind of real terms. Anyway, okay. So what about competing explanations? And I'm not saying this is the last word, even maybe not even the first word. It's a word in this literature. Maybe skewness is simply associated with quantitativeness, and it is true. Like if you go back to that thing, it is possible. So there is roughly, the cloud goes roughly in this direction. So there is, maybe skewness is simply just sort of residual quantitativeness we're not picking up. Okay. So maybe I should have just specified quantitativeness in a better way. Okay, but the response to that is, okay, we do control stuff, but there are fewer women and blacks and Hispanics in fields with greater skewness, even after controlling for quantitative. So we could control to some degree, maybe we could control it better. What's interesting too is that one way you can see that skewness and mathematicalness are not the same thing is, for example, mathematicalness makes a big difference in the percentage of foreign students, okay, but skewness doesn't. Okay, so they don't, they do seem to be different things, okay, based on this regression. Another example, which some people say is, maybe it's about the women's choices. Okay, it's basically about risk aversion. So if I go join like electrical engineering, it's more all or nothing. Either my paper will get 10 citations or 0, or if I do like material science, it's either, sort of smoother. So maybe it's a risk thing, and there is evidence that women tend to be less risk-loving than men. However, when people do try to test risk aversion among different ethnic groups, immigrants, and all that, that's very unclear. So if you really believe this, then you have to say, Asians are more risk-loving than whites, who are then more risk-loving than blacks and Hispanics. Which I don't think there's a lot of evidence for that. It's possible. There's actually evidence on like whether immigrants are more risk-loving than non-immigrants, and I think the evidence is that they are. But okay. Another example is maybe women dislike competitiveness, and by competitiveness, it's a field where for you to succeed, another person must lose. Okay, so it's seen as different from risk aversion. It's seen as kind of like how do you have to get ahead? And, I once had a student who was hired as a stock trader, an options trader in Chicago, and she played in the basketball team, and she said that their firm likes to hire women who play sports because they're used to people winning and losing, and they're okay with that. So that's kind of interesting. Anyway, so there's papers by producer Neely and Osterbeek where they look at like, I think they interview 13 and 14-year-old girls, 34-year-old boys, and ask them like, how much do you care about winning or losing? So they argue that women care about that less, girls care about that less, and that actually affects their decisions. They see math fields are more as more winner loser kind of situations. Okay. So this is possibly true, but my argument is that so far this argument has only been used in like very broad differences, like between humanities and math or something. So I'm going to say maybe that's true, but I don't think there's necessarily a huge winning and losing difference between electrical engineering and material science. Okay, like I think those are pretty similar fields in like how you get ahead. I can see how there'd be a difference in winning between like electrical and engineering and comp lit, but among the engineering fields, I don't see them as that different. So.
I have a question about
Yeah.
that. Maybe it's not about competitiveness, but it's that you have to work harder to be perceived as doing better than everyone else. Like what you were just showing me before, maybe it's not so much like that women dislike competitiveness,
Right.
but that like you have to be like people have to be sure that your private signal is awesome
Oh, I see. Right.
before you're even considered.
Oh, so in other words, women take this model in mind, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's possible.
But it's not so much competitiveness. Like, I mean, I don't care about
Oh, I see.
finding someone, but maybe I don't want to like constantly have to work
Oh, I
out
see what you're saying. That's
100%
interesting.
just to be better than like 70% of people or something.
And so that has to do with the all or nothingness of the field, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
So it's like if the field is more less or all or nothing, I can just sort of do my thing, and I'll be recognized for what I do, but I don't have to be a star. Like,
Yeah.
That's cute.
I was just gonna add that I'm sitting in the back and I saw a bunch of female heads nodding.
So, okay, sometimes I give this talk, and well, I don't give this talk very often, but sometimes people say, like, well, my referee reports will say stuff like, how do I know it's just all about women's choices? Because how do I know it's not about, women's stereotypes? Basically, it's all happening at the choice end. And my response to that will be, like, my labor economist friends will say, there's not an empirical difference between a quit and a fire. Have you heard that expression? So, like, if you're a labor economist, you're always interested like whether people quit or fire. But actually, you can't tell those different. So, in other words, whether women go into a field and whether women are encouraged in the field are actually not that different. They're all kind of the same thing. See what I'm saying? So, it's like in a labor economist. So, like, in other words, you make a job so unpleasant that the person will quit, and you're basically firing them. You know what I'm saying? So, in other words, by saying women don't want to go into physics, you're basically asking the question, what is it in physics that makes women not want to go into it? You see what I'm saying? So it's not like necessarily one or the other. It's kind of like what you're saying. That's interesting. I mean, yeah, that's interesting. Okay. Maybe we could test it directly, right?
What way?
Experimentally or something?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, another final possible. Do we go to 5 or 4:30 or
4:30.
Okay. Another possible explanation is kind of a more sociological one, which is maybe fields with a stronger central cabal keep out women's and blacks and Hispanics, and also enforce a single way of thinking that allows a paper to receive its citation. So basically, we're just seeing the same thing, which is basically how centralized the field is. For example, so I started in economics and I'm down in political science, and economics is definitely a little more centralized than political science in terms of like who kind of rules. Okay, and my impression of sociology is less so. History is even less so. Okay, so the sociologist Shigam Han looks at hiring networks, and he looks at like, so what he does is looks at who hires who, and I could do this too. Like, you look at like, for example, like if computer science is, like, for example, like if you look at the top 20 computer science departments, like 20% of those people all got their PhDs from Carnegie Mellon or something like that. It's extremely centralized. Okay, whereas if you do the same thing for education, it's not that way at all. Like, there are a lot of people in the top 20 education departments who got their PhDs from University of Kansas or something like that. Okay? So I think in some ways you can measure this. So he looks directly at the hiring networks and does social network analysis. He finds that English is very dominated by a single faction, whereas, for example, psychology and history have more multiple competing factions. So it could be simply that the more hierarchical it is, the more structured like a winner-take-all, more people want to, conform with each other. So what he finds is math is the most hierarchical, followed by economics, political science, sociology, psychology. Okay, so just so happens that's also, except for math is, well, I have math as relatively low students. Okay. This sequence of economics, political science, sociology, psychology, this is what he finds is the decreasing order of hierarchicalness in the hiring network. Okay, that also turns out to be decreasing order of students. Okay, so maybe it is true that this is what we're seeing as a sociological product of this field, as opposed to something inherent in this how to do scholarship. So that's also possible. All right. Oh, another final one is maybe men write more bad papers than women. So there's the field is there are more men. They write a lot more papers than citations. That's fine. Okay. But in general purpose, women are cited as papers right now. All right. So again, I'm not claiming that the story is 100% airtight, but I think there might be something more. Okay, any questions about that? Okay. So now I'm going to push ahead just another little kind of aside. This is good. So there's a recent paper in Science by Leslie, Cynthia, and Meyer Freeland. They're psychologists. They look at
What's the philosophy? Leslie's a philosopher.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, yeah. Okay, sorry.
Sorry, it's all
Okay,
fine.
no, thank you, I'm sorry. I think some of them are psychologists, right? I'm not completely wrong.
I don't know about the rest.
I think I talked with Brian. Oh, maybe I talked, okay, anyway. All right, well, what they did was, they looked at different, basically the same thing I did. They looked at women, percentage of women in a given field, and they said that what explains it is, they did a survey of people in those fields at all levels, postdocs, full professors, graduate students, and asked them, do you believe that inherent brilliance is necessary for success in your field? Okay? And what they found is that if people think that inherent brilliance is necessary for succeeding, there are fewer women in that field. And so their takeaway is we should de-emphasize this idea that you have to be inherently brilliant to be a successful physicist or something. So they surveyed 30 fields. They do a lot more work than I did because they actually had to send out surveys. I didn't do it, I just used public data. 20 of those fields overlap with mine because they have some humanities fields, like they have music composition, which is interesting because it's humanities field, but it's seen as very brilliant. Like you need to be brilliant to be like the next Bach or something like that. Also tends to be a lot fewer women in music composition compared to like humanities. Anyway, so a fine matchup now. This is their measure of brilliance. They call it field-specific ability. So this is the extent to which people will agree with the statement, to succeed in field X, you need to be brilliant. You need to have some natural talent, inherent talent. Okay? This is my students. This number again is the number of women in the field. So positively correlates. Okay? So it's interesting. Okay, so in other words, the fields in which people think brilliance is necessary tend to be the ones with the higher skewness. This is for the STEM fields. And this is for the non-STEM fields. Here it's not as clear. Because here, education is kind of an outlier. This is, people don't think you have to be brilliant to be a good person in education, but it does have high skewness. And even the rest of it is, I think, if I throw that away, sort of rough it up. Okay. And again, between economics, political science, sociology, psychology, kind of we do a thing. Okay, so is their story true or my story true? Okay, or maybe both. Does it have to, maybe this skewness is actually measuring brilliance in some sense, measuring to the extent to which people think that brilliance is necessary. Okay? Or maybe this is coming from this. Okay? Remember, this is I consider how much you want to agree with each other. This is what this is, I'm saying this is measuring your conformity payoff. Okay? Right, so what I'm going to argue is, I think that actually this explains it. Okay, so I think actually my explanation might be a little, the fundamental one, which is explaining this. In other words, fields in which people want to agree with each other more are more likely to be fields in which people think brilliance is necessary. Okay? So why do I believe that? Okay, so why would fields with higher skewness believe more in inherent talent? Okay. And this is the story. In a field with higher skewness, okay, people want more for your opinion to be the same as other people's. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Skewness is like a measure of how much you want your opinion to be similar to other people's. Now, I see a person out there that's very successful. How do I think, oh, that person's really got a great job. Why are they successful? Okay, obviously, when you succeed in many different, there are many, many things that explain that, like your talent, your connections, how hard you worked, luck, all these different things. Okay. If you think that this person's success depends on many different things, then you're not going to think that other people share the same opinion as you. Okay, because how would they know the same things you do? Okay, so for example, I see this brilliant violinist on stage. I think, boy, that person is really talented. Okay? And when I think that person is really talented, I think, well, that means, because I can see it, that person's so talented. And I'm thinking, well, if I explain it in terms of talent, that means that other people can see the same talent too. Okay? It's a public signal in some sense. It's inherent in them, it cannot change. Okay? If I see a talented violinist and say, boy, that person really practiced hard for the last 10 years, that might be just as equally good an explanation, but that explanation will not be shared by somebody else. Yeah? So the idea is that when I explain things in terms of inherent talent, it makes it, that is kind of like, I'm kind of like making up this little public signal, which I think other people will believe in too. Okay? If a person believes that his cause of success results from an unconditional, clear, visible attribute such as talent, which might not exist, it might be just like magical thinking. Okay? The nice thing about the explanation is that she can expect that other people share the same opinion. Okay, so what's my evidence here? So I'm just going to look at how people use the word talented to refer to occupations. So So I look at a bunch of occupations from the US Department of Labor's website, and I reduce each occupation to a single word, such as drafter, operator, teacher. So I have 376 words which refer to occupations. Then I use this HathiTrust digital library, it's a big online text corpus. You can use just Google searches too, and it works similar. The problem with Google searches is for not really repeatable, so maybe I use this. I like this ratio. The number of documents that contain, and these documents are like books or magazine articles, the number of documents that contain talented drafter over the number of documents that contain drafter. Okay? So what this means is, conditional on the document saying drafter, how many of them say talented drafter? So it's basically how often the word talented is used to refer to this occupation. Does that make sense? So just a strict word usage thing. So I looked at this for all 376 occupations. What do I get? So this is the top 30. So of all the occupations, musician is the most likely to be called talented. So almost 1% of the time a musician is used in a book, it's prefaced by the term talented musician. Okay? And now, roughly 1 out of every 1,000 times somebody uses the word mathematician, it's prefaced by the term talented mathematician. So these are the top 30. So there's all these other ones down here, which are almost never called talented. This is talented. That's the same thing for brilliant, skilled, dedicated, hardworking. Now, to me, this is interesting. Talented refers to, so these are the top: musician, artist, author, writer, editor, composer, lyricist, sculptor. What's interesting about these things is these all correspond to endeavors which are conducted publicly. Okay? These are all endeavors which one's enjoyment of it increases if other people enjoy it too. And so if I'm going to a show, I see this musician, it really makes me happy when other people around me are also enjoying it. When I listen to music, a composer, I know that people are singing it too. Almost all of these things, until you get, maybe the lawyer starts to drop off. Actor, there are talented physicians, okay? But not as many as talented musicians. Yeah? So this, I didn't make this up, right? This is really true. Okay? You could say maybe it's about the humanities or something like that, but this is interesting. How about brilliant? Brilliant, you see this a little bit, like, so strategist is the most common thing, but writer, performer, these are still kind of some public, it's not as strong as this. Well, how about these things? What about skilled? So musicians are clearly skilled, composers are skilled, sculptors are skilled, but you don't see that same pattern here. In other words, there's something about talent which is different from skill. Okay? And the idea, I think, is because talent is seen as inherent, seen as unchanging. A skill is something you can acquire. Talent is something like, this is like your essence somehow, whereas skill is not really your essence. You can pick up a skill. Okay? A skill, as an explanation, doesn't serve the same kind of coordinated quality. If I see something with skills, I don't think that other people will see the same thing. And hardworking is even stronger. Like here, a musician can be hardworking, right? But we're more likely to consider a mechanic to be hardworking. These professions don't have the same kind of social aspect. Even though they're high skilled, like, paramedic, lawyer. I guess lawyer is pretty good. Like lawyer is hardworking and anyway, you see, so I think there's some evidence from when we think about talent. Why do we use talent only for these things, and why do we not use hardworking, dedicated so much for musician, artists, authors? I think there was this. All right. Okay, so some related phenomena. So when you give a job talk, this is something everyone knows. If you make a mistake, it's much better to make the mistake in individual meetings than in the job talk. Okay, why is that? Well, the one explanation is that there are many more people in job talk. But still, if there are 10 people in job talk, you'd rather make a mistake individually, each of the 10 individually, than in the big group. And why is that? I think this is a story. It's because if you make it publicly, then it serves as kind of a coordinated thing. People say, oh, that person's not good, the end. Right? Because they know that everyone else saw it, and hence you can use that to coordinate their opinions. Okay? Similarly, if you're saying a brilliant thing, you would rather say something brilliant in a job talk than individually each of the 10 people. Yeah? My other job talk advice is don't eat things that have lots of sauce in them. My other job talk advice is if you're asked if you want dessert, say yes. Because once you say yes, then everyone else gets to have dessert. That's all my job talk advice. Okay. This is a classic social psychology thing. Stereotypes, this is similar kind of thing. They ask a group of students to discuss a student body president based on facts they provided by the candidates. What they do is they give a group of people, and they give some people all the same information, like 3 facts. Everyone has these facts, but they give more facts which are dispersed. Some of these facts just to some people. So the idea is, can this group of people assemble all these facts and put them all together? But it turns out that you would think that the facts which they can all share together in discussion, they should dominate the discussion. So what they usually do is give, like, there's 3 positive facts total, but there's 7 negative facts, but the 7 negative facts are given like 1 to each person, whereas the 3 positive are given to every person. So the negative facts should, on the whole, carry everything. Okay? However, when they do this, it doesn't work. Okay? What dominates is, instead of the dispersed facts kind of entering discussion, people saying, hey, that person, I'm letting this negative information go in. Rather, what carries the day is the facts which everyone already knows. Okay? In some sense, discussion actually doesn't do such a good job in aggregating information. What it does do good is confirming information people already know. Okay? So there's a heavy bias toward information which everyone shares. This is Clark and Kashima. They tell students a story and ask them which facts they would include if they were to retell the story to another student at the same university. Turns out students tend to include facts consistent with stereotypes, in this case without maleness, rather than facts inconsistent with them. So you would think that if people want to convey information in a story, they should give facts which are inconsistent with stereotypes, because those are more interesting, provide more information, in terms of the Bayesian updating sense. However, people don't do it. When students are told that many students at the university share those stereotypes, they're actually more likely to say, okay, the stereotypical stuff. And the interpretation is that communication is not just about conveying information, but also reinforcing conformity, community in some sense. Cecilia Ridgway looks at high-tech startup firms. So one interesting question looks at is, like, we have this new firm, we're all like 25, 27, we're all making this a new app. Why is it that we somehow import, gender roles into this new situation? So there's a lot of attention about this in Silicon Valley recently, of course. Okay, so why is this true? So she says the cultural beliefs about gender that are activated in the background are more traditional than the innovative circumstances they confront. So in other words, it's not like how sex roles are kind of an aspect of the industrial age, and then we don't have to have them somehow in the high-tech age. Rather, they're re-imported them. And in fact, high-tech startup firms that emphasize company culture, fitting in, and informal peer control, which are more kind of about fitting in, they tend to be worse for women than firms which are more rule-based or bureaucratic. So we just kind of see this story. So conclusion. So if a stereotype has strength because it's public, it's not going to work if we all do our own little thing. It's not good for me to say, there's stereotypes, but in my own little heart, I'm going to do what I can. That's not going to work, because it's not public. Okay? To counter a public stereotype, you have to do so publicly. Okay? As in a way which is common knowledge. In a way that when some people see it, they know that other people see it also. So things like role models or awards, this kind of thing, that's kind of what you need. Okay? So everyone doing your own small bit is not going to work. So public role models not only help, so people talk about what the effective role models are. One of those obviously is to get people to come to the field, but also it changes the public stereotype. So in other words, public role models help not just by getting people to come to the field, but also allowing people in the field to be evaluated more correctly. Similarly, hiring committees and admissions committees more diverse. People say it works better because there's more opinions in it. But also another way it can help is because in a diverse group, you're less likely to care about agreeing with other people. So it's a way of kind of short-circuiting the conformity of the group. Because, like, if I'm in a committee with people in my field, I don't care so much. Yeah? So that also might work.